Hello and welcome to the podcast. This is To Lead is to Learn. In this new podcast, we're going to be exploring leadership theories and practices. Influence is the foundation of leadership, but what actually is it and how is it achieved? A leader's job is often seen by organisations as one which involves getting their followers to complete the work to a certain standard by a certain time. However, is this really leadership? Is influence something which a leader has, which allows for work to be completed by their followers? Within this podcast, we will explore this term influence in order to define what it actually is in the context of leadership and how it differs from similar terms. We will also see how influence is linked to conformity before looking at some practical ways in which influence can be developed and used. First and foremost, we need to define what the term influence means within a leadership context. If you look up the word influence, you will find two different definitions. One is for influence as a noun, while the other is for the verb to influence. There are two definitions itself for influence as a noun. The first is the capacity to have an effect on the character, development, or behaviour of someone or something, or the effect itself. This definition suggests influence could be a positive thing, while a second definition is to have the power to shape policy or to ensure favourable treatment for someone, especially through status, contacts, or wealth, which suggests influence has more of a selfish element. This use of the word influence is considered synonymous with some of the following words. On the positive side, we have leadership, guidance, direction, and connections. On the negative side, we have control, authority, domination, supremacy, pressure. Then somewhere in between lies the following words: sway, impact, power, effect, leverage, weight, standing, prestige, stature, rank, position, station, clout, and pull. A large number of these words have negative connotations. They suggest in some respect that influence is in some way a manipulative trait. When considered a verb, we find the following definition: to affect or change someone or something in an indirect but usually important way. This use of influence is considered synonymous with the following terms. On the positive end, we have affect, determine, guide, shape, transform, impel. On the negative side, there's control, pressurize, coerce, coax, lure, cajole, manipulate, intimidate. And then again, somewhere in between, we find the words form, change, alter, modify, persuade, convince, and tempt. This again has a bit of a negative connotation in some respects. Therefore, it may be important for us to have our own definition for influence and distinguish a key difference between three very similar terms: influence, persuade, and coerce. Persuasion within a leadership context is the act of making a rational argument for or against an action in a manner which evokes a strong positive emotional response. This is much more specific and is arguably less reliant on the individual. When we compare this to our definition of influence, the act of persuasion requires either some evidence or a clear line of reasoning. Coercion, on the other hand, is the act of demanding, forcing, or manipulating people to do what you tell them, whether they want to or not. This is a strong command and control approach, using a level of authority to demand action. When compared to influence, This removes all consideration of the individual being coerced. The three terms, therefore, within a leadership context span a spectrum, from one end being coercion to the other being influence. What, therefore, increases or decreases as we go from one end, corresponding to coercion, towards the other, which corresponds to influence? There is more than one answer to this. The major one is trust. With coercion, there is a large level of distrust from the superordinate to the subordinate members of the team. As such, little room for reasoning or interpretation is provided. It is a my way or the highway approach, and this leaves the subordinates feeling powerless, disengaged, and unmotivated. The environment created through this approach can be toxic for both the subordinates and the organization as a whole. Within persuasion, the act of rationalizing and evidencing adds more consideration to the subordinates. This is less of a tell approach and is now more of a sell approach. Within this approach, there is an increased element of trust. It comes across as a we trust you to understand why we have made this decision. Finally, influence embraces and bestows trust upon the subordinates. Here, the leader requires less of the sell approach as they empower their team members to choose for themselves. Trust is a given from the leader in this relationship, and as such, the followers give their trust willingly in return to the leader. The decision making within this environment is more of a test, consult, or even one of co-creation. The leader approaches their followers with a what do you think of? And this act alone opens up discussions where the followers are able to come to a decision themselves, aligned or not with the thoughts of the leader. This encourages the development of behaviors, knowledge, skills, or even an individual's character. True influence, therefore, empowers followers to bestow the leadership upon an individual. If we recall the definition of leadership, which we outlined within our first episode, What is Leadership? If you haven't listened to this one yet, feel free to go back and listen to this one first. Our definition was Alberto Silva's definition, that leadership is the process of interactive influence that occurs when, in a given context, some people accept someone as their leader to achieve common goals. One of the key elements here is that of interactive influence, which centers around two-way communication alongside accepting someone as a leader. We can see here that leadership involves others to accept influence from an individual. Therefore, a superior cannot impose leadership onto others. By definition, the act of imposing will not achieve influence, and instead will be utilizing coercion, or at best, persuasion. Once others have chosen, appointed, or as in most cases, accepted an individual as their leader, there is a requirement that the individual conforms to the role of being the leader. The interactive influence has, in this instance, been from the subordinates towards the leader. How the leader takes this bestowed power and uses it can then determine how the subordinates experience their working environment. Within psychology, conformity goes hand in hand with what is known as majority influence. It is a type of influence which is defined as a change in belief or behavior in response to either real or imagined social pressure. Conformity itself comes in three types. The first is compliance. This is where an individual may agree outwardly with another individual or group, going along with an action or agreeing with an opinion. However, the individual themselves inwardly disagrees with the opinion or action which was taken. This can become serious as there is a misalignment between the individual's behaviour and their personal beliefs or values. If sustained, this can lead to cognitive dissonance, where there is a dissociation between the inner self and the outer self. The second is internalization. This is where an individual may agree with a group both internally and externally, changing their inner self and their outer self to align with the group. This is the deepest form of conformity, and the beliefs of the group have become the beliefs of the individual. This is where external influence has had a developmental impact on the individual. This can have both positive and negative connotations, depending on who is the influencer and for what purpose this influence is being used. The third is identification. This occurs when an individual conforms to the demands of a given social role within a group. This impacts the external self and the way one presents themselves or behaves as a result of the social role which they hold. However, this does not impact upon the internal opinion of the individual themselves. This often occurs as a result of the job which an individual holds, such as a teacher or a policeman. The type of conformity will depend on the level of influence, the context, and the type of influence itself being experienced. This is important within a work environment, as conformity is often a result of the culture within an organization, and the culture is often influenced by the leadership that's being experienced by the individuals within that organization. Fundamentally, conformity often occurs due to a desire to fit in. There may be a level of normative social influence, where an individual conforms in order to not appear foolish or to feel left out. The influence is often subconscious and non-intentional, but in order to not stand out, an individual will change their outer self, the behaviours and public stance, in order to align to that of the group. This change is temporary, as it has not changed the inner self in terms of their beliefs, values, or feelings. An individual may even conform as a result of informational influence, where the desire to be right leads to the individual looking to someone who they deem to know more than they do. This often happens in instances where an individual is unsure of the situation or lacks knowledge in order to make an informed decision. This type of influence often leads to internalization, and this is where there can be a change to the inner self as well as the outer self. There are therefore two commonly accepted reasons for conformity: the desire to fit in and the desire to be right. These are fundamental to everybody and is a result of two key influences: the external influence held by both the group and the environment, as well as society as a whole, and the internal influence with the inner desire to fit in and to be seen to be right. There are several key factors which have been found to influence the level of conformity seen within individuals. The first is the size of the group. It's been found that in general, the bigger the group which is being conformed to, the more individuals will in fact conform. However, when this is looked at further, this trend plateaus when the group size gets too large. In other words, when the group is a small, intimate one, and the individual is likely to overtly stand out, they are more likely to conform than when there is a larger group and the individual can hide. The level of their conformity plateaus. The optimal group size for conformity was found to be 4. Increases beyond this led to minimal changes in the levels of conformity. The second is unanimity. It almost seems a given, but a person is more likely to conform when all members of a group agree. When one person or more within the group disagrees, the level of conformity drops. This makes sense, as this introduces a level of ambiguity or insecurity within the conformity. Just one person disagreeing within a group has been shown to drop conformity by as much as 80%. The third is the level of difficulty of the task. When the task is difficult to complete, or the differences between the possible choices is very small, the level of conformity actually increases. It appears that when the decision is harder, we look for others to reassure us and for confirmation, which increases the level of conformity. The fourth is confidentiality. This is another one which seems a bit of a given, but when an individual is asked to put forward an opinion in the presence of a group, the level of conformity increases. However, when asked in private, away from the social pressures of the group, conformity decreases as the fear of rejection from the group decreases. Conforming to social roles is key within the working environment, as we as individuals spend the majority of our time within this setting. There is a large social pressure to conform to the expectations of the social role. These roles could be anywhere from a new starter through to seasoned professionals, or even the wiser old head. For us as a leader, there is the social conformity of fitting in with the expectation of what a leader is supposed to be like. This is different for each of us due to our individual settings. The culture within each of our organizations dictates a large element of what it is to be a leader within that organization. The culture will set what the team expect from a new leader, even before they meet the new leader, or even if the leader is one of the team themselves. They will be expecting that individual to change as a result of the promotion. There will also be social pressures from the hierarchy already in place, expecting the leader to fall in line with how things are done here. The need to conform to the social role is known as identification. Depending on the environment alongside the systems and procedures which are in place, there are enabling conditions encouraging this social conformity. In particular, within organizations, there are hierarchical structures, with systems often enforcing alignment which encourage this. Therefore, the more power that comes with the role being conformed to will lead to a quicker rate of conformity, as less of the changes in behavior will get questioned by others. Subordinates will often resist the conformity for longer. However, they too will soon conform to their role within the hierarchy. The rate and level of conformity to social roles will be more extreme within organizations which have a strong hierarchical structure, alongside a more individualistic culture, meaning the individual performance is prioritized over that of the collective group. This would be an organization where there are clearly defined roles and levels, with promotions provided to high performers as a result of performance management. This encourages individuals to prioritize their measurables over that of the group. Less support and encouragement is given to others, and there will be an element of ensuring their work is completed before aiding or supporting others in theirs. There is less sharing of expertise or cross-team collaboration taking place, meaning the relationships at work are more transactional. The opposite to this would be a flat structure alongside a more collective culture. This would be an organization without clearly defined roles. Individuals will work across multiple teams and have different roles within each. There is a strong collaborative element to the work being completed, with less emphasis on individual performance, rather that of the collective. There is a culture of sharing expertise and encouragement of growth and development. Within this sort of organization, there is less pressure to conform to any form of social role, as each individual plays a collective of roles. Individuals, regardless of their roles and stature, will have an internal measure of belief as to the level of control which they have over their own behaviour. This is known as the locus of control, and there is a spectrum here ranging from an extreme internal locus to an extreme external locus. An individual with an extreme internal locus would consider control to lie within themselves. In other words, the individual would believe that they always made things happen. They would hold a "look what I can do" or "look what I did" attitude. They believe they are in complete control of their future. On the contrary, an individual with an extreme external locus would consider control to lie elsewhere. In other words, the individual would believe that things constantly happen to them. They would hold a "why does everything happen to me?" or "there was nothing I could do" attitude. They believe that nothing they do would impact on their future. These are two extreme examples, and most people lie somewhere in the middle. Certain settings or situations would lead to a shift along this spectrum. An example may be that an individual might believe that they have more control within their work environment than that of their home life, or vice versa. Within this spectrum, individuals who are more likely to conform to subordinate social roles will be those with a more external locus of control. By holding this belief, they have already bestowed the power over themselves onto external factors. For a subordinate, a strong hierarchical structure could also influence their internal belief and cause a shift towards a more external locus of control. Promotion and higher positions within the hierarchical structure can lead to a shift in the opposite direction towards a more internal locus of control. These individuals could also be at risk of conforming to authoritarian roles. The extreme internal locus of control could shift their focus away from the collective, and their belief of being in full control will provide resistance towards bestowing power onto others. However, alongside this, a predisposition towards an internal locus of control will mean that this individual would be less likely to conform to a subordinate role and therefore resist social pressure towards conformity within the hierarchical structure. As a leader, it is important to acknowledge that we play a role in shaping the level and type of conformity which occurs within the organization. We have a direct impact on multiple facets which shape the environment and culture of the team. Conformity within individuals will always happen to different extents, whether this is in the form of compliance, which occurs without buy-in, or identification, which occurs as a result of social pressure. However, the ultimate form of compliance occurs in the shape of internalization. This is the form of compliance which leads to growth and development. This involves buy-in, and the role of the leader within this cannot be underestimated. At the beginning of this podcast, we defined a spectrum encompassing influence, persuasion, and coercion. We can also acknowledge that all three will lead to a form of conformity, which, however, will lead to internalization. This is, of course, what we have defined as influence, the ability to impact an organization and their results through changing behaviors and inspiring others to take action. In order to inspire others, we must include them within the decision making. We must make use of or challenge their internal beliefs in order to develop alignment and encourage a positive form of action, be this a behavior or a form of personal development. By defining leadership as the process of interactive influence, which takes place when a leader is accepted in order to achieve common goals, we automatically bestow a large amount of power upon the subordinates. We acknowledge that the process involves at every stage the subordinates. We acknowledge that they have an equal amount of influence over us as the leader as we do on them, that they are able to change and challenge our beliefs towards a positive form of action. We acknowledge that they have the ability to impact and change the organization itself, changing the behavior of the organization where necessary in order to improve the way things are done, all with the common goals in mind. These goals must be shared. This can be organizational goals in terms of productivity measures, but equally personal development and growth goals. As a leader who has been accepted by the subordinates, we must put the interests of the individuals within our team upon equal footing as that of the organization and work towards alignment between these two. But how exactly can we achieve this? In 1984, American psychologist Robert Bino Cialdini published a book entitled Influence: The Psychology of Persuasion. Within this book, he outlined 6 fundamental principles which has since been used within a wide range of sectors, from developing marketing strategies through to relationship advice. The 6 principles are reciprocation, commitment and consistency, social proof, liking, authority, and scarcity. In 2016, he went on to propose a 7th principle, which he called the unity principle. The first principle, reciprocation, outlines the concept that if someone is willing to do something nice for us, then we are more likely to return the favor and do something nice for them. This trait is embodied in all cultures across the globe and is a human characteristic which allows us to live as a society. People will generally feel obliged to return favors or acts of kindness which have been offered to them. At times, this can also be seen as a paid forward favor, where an individual will receive an act of kindness or favor and pay it forward onto another individual with the internal belief that they will have returned the kindness done unto them. The second principle, commitment and consistency, runs off the human desire to appear consistent within their behavior. Once an individual has made a decision, they will tend to stick to it, as it has become a mental shortcut. They no longer need to expel vital energy in making the decision again. This can be considered, at times, as an individual being stubborn, as when an individual has already done something one way, they will more often do it that way again, as this takes less thinking to repeat the same set of actions. This is often used by individuals and organizations alike by encouraging someone to make a small initial commitment which can lead to a further larger commitment. This is known as the foot in the door technique. This should also be used in reverse, as individuals also expect consistency and want to experience it. This starts by making promises to an individual and sticking to them, improving their experience by outlining what is required of them up front, what they are to expect, and provide them with any relevant information. The third principle, social proof, is the idea behind social norms. Individuals tend to do what others around us are doing, as we instinctively think others know more about something or a situation than we do. This also encompasses the concept that individuals will tend to look to other people similar to themselves when making decisions, in particular within situations of uncertainty or ambiguity. The fourth principle is liking. This embodies the idea that being nice to people brings you rewards and also extends into micro interactions. Therefore, people are more likely to agree to do things for people who they like. The factors which are considered within likability are someone's appearance, their physical attractiveness, and how they present themselves tends to lead to more favorability afforded to them. Similarity, people tend to do favors for others who are most like themselves. Complementary, people will favor others who have paid compliments to them. Trusting, people will favour others who they perceive they will be able to form a trusting relationship with. And humour. Someone's sense of humour will lead to more favourability, as their ability to make others laugh makes them more likeable. The fifth principle is authority. An individual will tend to obey authority figures, even when they are asked to perform objectionable acts. This is often cited as the reason why atrocities are performed by people simply following orders. This can be viewed in both a positive as well as a negative way. An individual's authority can be seen as a source of credibility or reassurance to others. It is often a cliché, with great power comes great responsibility. With authority comes the power to either influence or, as we have seen before, coerce. Favour is often readily given to those with authority. How this is seen in the long run, however, comes down to how this favour is treated. Authority should be seen as a privilege, and as such should be used in a way which creates a positive impact on those under our charge. The sixth principle, scarcity, involves an individual tending to have a higher desire for things or opportunities which are deemed to be rarer. Fewer spaces, the more exclusive it is, or even the less frequent the opportunity, the more an individual will want to do it. If there is a perceived chance of missing out on something, there will be more desire by more individuals to be involved. This is used quite commonly with making it seem as though there is a limited availability and that there are only X amount left, or countdown clocks to complete sign-ups. An individual will tend to view this as a pressurizing approach, so this should be used sparingly in order to limit this feeling of pressurizing, and instead make it more of an encouraging technique. The seventh principle is the unity principle. Here, the more an individual identifies themselves with others, the more they are influenced by them. This is from a desire to belong, as everybody wants to feel accepted by others, and this is more likely to be the case where there is already some form of alignment. When joining a group, if an individual feels that they are aligned with some of the characteristics or beliefs of the others within the group, then they are more likely to be influenced by further group views and behaviours. This seventh principle is abused within extremist groups by attracting others into a group with a few characteristics, and then using the unity principle to manipulate the other beliefs and actions in order for them to belong. However, within our context, this principle can be used to ensure everyone is on the same page with a common, unified set of goals. A final principle we should keep in mind is that of salience. We first need to be sure we know what salience is. This is the principle which tells us that an individual is more likely to have their attention drawn to something which is most relevant to them. In other words, if there are several opportunities open to an individual, they will be drawn to the one which is most relevant to them as an individual. What the main driver is behind what is deemed most relevant is hidden and internal to the individual. However, if we as the leader have an open dialogue with the individuals within our team, we may be able to steer an individual towards an opportunity by making sure it is promoted in a way which makes it most relevant to that individual. So how can we make use of these 7 principles within our leadership to have a greater level of influence without being manipulative? This can be achieved in the following ways. The first principle can be used by acknowledging that the transaction of reciprocation will always start with us as a leader. After all, the leader must lead the way. As a leader, we can look to place the interests of our followers first, by prioritizing their interests over our own or those of the organization. We will encourage our followers to repay the favor. The act of placing our followers first can curry favor and encourage our followers to put the interests of the organization first. When the followers feel that we as the leader are genuinely interested in their development, growth, and progression, they will be more inclined to increase their efforts and get favorable outcomes for the organization. In other words, we will increase productivity by not prioritizing productivity, but rather the development of the individuals within the organization. How do we, as the leader, prioritize the interests of those within our organization? The second principle encompasses the two key concepts of commitment and consistency. As with everything, it starts with and builds from the leader. Therefore, as the leader, there must be a clear level of consistency in terms of temperament, behavior, and expectations. Any deviation from the consistent level should be minor and brief and met with openness to challenges. Alongside the consistency is the level of commitment. The leader must make commitments to their followers. These should not be large and unrealistic commitments, but small and incremental commitments which are met and sustained. This shows the followers that they are prioritized by their leader. Alongside the leader, this principle can be viewed in respect to the followers. The consistency in terms of behavior, almost getting to a stage of automation, should start with training and onboarding. By increasing the element of automation, in particular when it comes to admin tasks and low challenge tasks, in order to reduce the level of thinking and time commitment required on these tasks, will ensure they are more likely to be completed. When these are done, the reward is an increased amount of effort and time given to more challenging and rewarding tasks. As the leader, the role we have is to provide the environment and other enabling conditions that would make these tasks quick and easy to do, and then praising the consistency which is achieved. This almost becomes a positive reinforcement and therefore a dopamine hit for the followers, which further feeds forward into the desire to complete them. The leader can also utilize this by acknowledging that buy-in can be seen as an encompassing of the foot in the door and the follow-up work which takes place. When a new project, approach, or direction is faced, the leader must get a significant level of buy-in from their followers. This will always start with a foot in the door level of commitment from the followers. In other words, the leader can look to get a small initial commitment towards the new project, approach, or direction. This acknowledges that it is almost easier for followers to carry on the path that they have committed to than turn back and break off. Getting early momentum behind the movement will lead to perpetual motion within the direction. Then the commitment can be reinforced with even bigger recommitments. As a leader, therefore, how do we look to maintain consistency within our approach? How often do we commit to our followers before expecting them to commit back? How often do we review and look to provide enabling conditions which can promote automation of medial, less enjoyable tasks? Do we look to get small but increasing commitments behind new approaches, or large, daunting commitments which can produce a fearful response from our followers? The third principle can be used in multiple ways, as this is about the social interactions between the individuals within our teams. We should use this differently depending on the situation we are dealing with. The first situation we can use this within is the onboarding process. When we make a new hire, we should look to use a buddy or mentor system. However,
This should not just be anybody, or even the superstar within the team. As this principle tells us, we should look to buddy them up with the person on the team which is the most like they are, because individuals tend to do what those who are similar to them do. However, this can be undone if there is a critical mass of people within the team which are doing something different. Therefore, we must be careful with what the majority of our teams are doing. The next situation where we can make use of this is when we are looking to implement a change. This will be met with resistance naturally, as we are expecting individuals to go against their previously learnt and reinforced behaviour. We need to identify early adopters, individuals who have brought into the change already, and then look to pair these up with other individuals. Once we have increased the adoption of the new way, or even the buy-in to the new way, we can then make use of the critical mass and social norming in order to sway the remaining members of the team to conform to the new way, particularly if we reinforce the early and continued adoption through praise and feedback. The desire for recognition and acknowledgement of the others in the team will often lead to conforming to what those already receiving this are doing. As a leader, we should look to the processes we use when implementing a change. How do we make use of their social interactions and encourage conformity? Are we aware of how our teams interact honestly? Do we know who the most influential members of the team are? How could we make use of this? Could we encourage these individuals to be the early adopters? The fourth principle is so fundamental and yet often ignored. It is as simple as being likable. As a leader, we do not need to be an authoritarian or command through fear. We do not need to be demanding and expect results from individuals without giving back. Being nice to people will always win in the end. It will always reap the rewards and encourage a greater level of productivity. This goes beyond what we say or do and spans how we present ourselves and what they experience about us as a leader. Think of how an individual hears what you are saying, and then add into this the tone it was delivered within, the body language displayed, all the way through to the micro expressions displayed on your face during the interaction. All of these layer up to the experience which an individual has had and is left with during the interaction. This is why two people can say the same thing yet be taken and experienced very differently. Being liked is key for us as a leader as well as for our followers. As much as someone wants to come to work and like the person they are working for, it is equally important to come to work and be liked. We spend so much time at work in what we often refer to as work mode, it becomes hard to be someone other than ourselves. So why do we spend so much effort hiding who we are while we are at work? As a leader, we can change this by bringing 3 big parts of ourselves with us to work and embracing them. The first is our sense of humour. This will make work more enjoyable to everyone. You will seem more approachable as a leader, and your followers will find you more like one of them. How many times have you been in a group of people and someone says a silly joke? Even if it's not funny, you will still laugh over how unfunny it is. This breaks down barriers between people, and people will be more willing to do things for you as they will like you more. The second is being more complimentary. Just simple compliments about their work and their efforts, particularly if they have gone above and beyond. But don't just compliment everything as a matter of course. It has to be genuine. Take the time to seek someone out to compliment them if they have done something big. Or be present and impromptu with the compliments. This can just be as simple as an in passing, seeing someone and saying something like, "Oh, Joe, last week, that amendment to the report you made, that made all the difference. Thank you, I really appreciated it." It seems more genuine, and to the individual, it will come across this way. The third is being trustworthy. When your team trusts you and feel like you trust them, they will immediately like you more. Feeling trusted is empowering, and people like feeling empowered. Trust is a big topic, and we will explore this in an episode in the future. It is key as a leader that we acknowledge that the most influential leaders are followed because of who they are. And if who you are is liked, they will follow you further, faster, and for longer. How are we making sure we are liked by our followers? The fifth principle is often the most accepted, acknowledged, and used. However, too often it is abused by leaders. Authority is bestowed upon individuals by organizations with their hierarchical structures. However, what is often not accepted is that this is the start of the process, not the culmination of one. By gaining authority, you are automatically provided with the ability to make individuals do something. However, as we have seen, this may come in different forms, but true influence is deeper rooted and longer lasting. With authority, if not used in the correct manner, this can lead to the breakdown of the relationship as a result of the abuse of power. As a leader, you should ensure that just because you have authority, it does not give you the right to make individuals follow orders and just do things because that is what you want them to do. Look to reason your decisions, discuss them with your followers, and most of all, align the underlying values behind your decisions. How do you go about decision making? How do you look to influence others when there is a decision to be made? The sixth principle is often used to sell things. However, we can use this within organizations by considering the opportunities which we provide our followers, be this development opportunities, opportunities to be seconded to other areas, or work collaboratively. There is a fine balance here, as if these are too few and far between, then not enough of these opportunities will be available for people to sign up for. On the other hand, too many, and they will not be as attractive as it becomes a, well, everybody does it, and therefore will not feel special enough to get involved in. Therefore, we as leaders need to provide enough of these to show that we are providing opportunities which they can get involved in and encourage them to participate in. They need to be rare enough that when we do encourage them to go for the opportunity, it is seen as special, and they feel lucky to be put forward for it. If the scarcity principle is abused, we lose favour and trust, which we have seen is part of the fifth principle. In other words, if we make it out to be a rare opportunity, yet it is provided to almost everybody, then it loses its specialty, and therefore we come across as manipulative. So how do we, as leaders, make use of this principle to provide opportunities which seem special? Who do we choose to put forward for opportunities? What is it the reward for doing? How are we using these opportunities to promote good habits and practices within the rest of our team, so they strive to be given the same opportunities? The seventh principle is key for us as leaders. This encompasses the concept that if we make ourselves identifiable to our followers, they will be more likely to follow us. If our followers can recognize themselves within us, then they are more likely to be influenced by us. We therefore cannot change too much as we progress through leadership positions. Otherwise, we become unrecognizable and our followers will not identify with us. As we are an identifiable character within a position of authority, we become the benchmark for our followers. They seek approval from us with a sense of belonging and being acknowledged by us. They see a familiar person, like them, who has made it to a superior position, being acknowledged and recognized as doing the right thing by us, the message which this sends to them is one of approval. We therefore have a level of influence over our followers by being one of them. They recognize an element of their character and their capabilities within us, and parts of our character or our capabilities which they want to have. Therefore, they will have the desire to strive to be more like us. The way we think, act, and interact becomes important, as this will set the tone for the culture, let alone the results which we get from them. So as a leader, how aware are we of our status as a role model to those within our charge? How much thought do we put into the like begets like process which takes place within our teams? How do we share our thoughts, display our actions, and perform our interactions, as this will be mimicked by those who look up to us and look to emulate us? As always, I want to leave you with 3 finishing questions. The first question is, as a leader, we have decisions which we must make. But how do we go about making these decisions, and how do we share the outcomes of these? Do we empower our followers to buy in and share our values, and therefore come to the same decisions which we would have? Do we even give them the opportunity to do so? The second question is, what environment do we provide for our teams? Do we show them that we care, that they are a priority, that their growth, development, and well-being are important to us? Are we even aware of how our followers feel in this respect? Are we aware that this is taken into account by our followers when they are subconsciously deciding on the level of influence they are bestowing upon us? And my final question, to what extent are we aware of how we come across to our followers? Do we make an effort to be consistent? Are we making ourselves approachable and likable in order to harness more influence over them? Are we being genuine in our interactions, or are they forced? Are we aware that our followers can tell the difference between the two? Are we aware that for some of our team, we are seen as a role model, and that they may emulate our behavior? Are we aware of the level of responsibility we therefore have within our position?
And until next time, remember, to lead requires us to continuously